Hello again, welcome to Just Saying. I'm Steve McFeeters along with Mike Jensen, the publisher of the Standard Democrat newspaper. And if you see our ads in the paper and you wonder what this is about, well, you have to go to the internet. You go to the Standard Democrat web page.
Correct.
On the front page is Just Saying, and you can click on it and watch our little interview program.
Absolutely, yes, and it's quick and painless. Mm-hmm. We take about 10 minutes every week. We thank you for joining us this week, and we hope you continue to join us. And we try to talk about topics that are of interest to our community, our region, and we've got 2 or 3 topics we want to talk about today.
Absolutely, and of course the man-made disaster over at Bird's Point and the spillway has been dominating the news headlines this year. You've read about it in the Standard Democrat. You've heard about it on KFES 12, and it's been a big issue. We had Kevin Maynard, the mayor of East Prairie, on a few weeks back. We've had Joanne Emerson. Mm-hmm. We've had county commissioners talking about this and the economic impact. Well, Mike had made actually the USA Today Tuesday of this week on page 3. They actually, the reporter who did it went into the Just Saying program and had talked to Mayor Maynard over there. So on page 3, the headline reads, "Towns still recuperating from blown levee in Missouri." And they highlight what the recovery, or lack of recovery, is like in the spillway area. And of course, the Corps is rebuilding the levee, but just to 51 feet instead of 61.5 or 62 feet. Mike, you've got some maybe no information on that.
A little bit of information. First off, the USA Today piece, which is a national newspaper, it puts a national spotlight on what has been a regional issue for us. It obviously, for us, it hits very close to home because it affects the people in our region, affects our economy tremendously. More importantly, it affects the lives of a lot of people who are in that region. But you know, we're in an instance where any publicity is good publicity.
Right.
And if this spreads the message of the plight of those who are impacted by this, then so be it. We were having a discussion earlier. Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri held a news conference this week, actually, and announced that it looks like the Corps of Engineers will get a full $2 billion in funding for levee repairs as a result of the flooding this past spring. Now, $2 billion is a lot of money, obviously.
Right.
But nonetheless, that money is going to be spread over flooding starting with the Missouri River up north of us all the way down to the Gulf. So although it's a substantial amount of money, I think the jury is still out on how much money we will get for the specific problem we have in this area. And the situation is just as you said, and that we've talked about before. The Corps is currently planning on building the levee to a certain height. I think it's 51 foot. Mm-hmm. The farmers in that region and the landowners in that region recognize that to additionally protect and adequately protect that region, it needs to be built to the level that it was before, which is in the 61, 62 foot level. Mm-hmm. So I don't think at this point we know exactly what the final outcome is going to be, but the good news is that at least it appears that there's $2 billion in funding for it that's going to be available real soon, and that's got to be a good sign.
Well, that's to rebuild the levees, not necessarily repair any damages from the man-made disaster.
No, none whatsoever. Right. This is strictly for levee repair. Mm-hmm. And what we have to understand is obviously the bulk of the damage was done when you're talking in terms of 130,000 acres in southeast Missouri. The bulk of the damage, the impact was here.
Right.
But there was other impact up north of us and south as well. So
Louisiana in particular.
Absolutely, and they had the advantage there. Instead of blowing levees, they were able to open up floodgates.
Right.
And so there's some incumbent damage with that. But as I said, we don't know the details. We may not know for a while. But at least the politicians in Washington have recognized that this is unique, this is substantial, and that it appears that at least $2 billion in funding is going to be coming down the pike for that levee repair.
That's good. Now, you never know about the timing, but when you see it in USA Today and there's announcement of funds available.
Yeah, that's excellent. And it's my understanding, too, and I don't know if this will ever come about, but it's my understanding Wall Street Journal is also considering doing an article on that as well.
Right.
And so what that says is that a problem that we've lived with since early May is now at least getting some attention in a national scope.
Sure.
And hopefully that bodes well for our area for the funding.
Another headline this week in your newspaper, obviously, is the recent shutdown of the Malco Theater. And I read Malco's response and how they were surprised about this. And I know there's work probably going on now between Malco and the city to try to come to some sort of solution. But I was surprised that the word surprised was used, because I wasn't surprised. I was at that hearing where the Malco gentleman called his own facility a dump, and probably it said we probably have liabilities, and that is just puzzling to me.
It is, and by far this is a hot potato issue in Sikeston right now.
Absolutely.
And it is because, as of right now, as we take this program, we do not have a theater in Sikeston.
Correct.
And as I wrote in Sunday's newspaper, I don't know that there's, quite frankly, if there's anyone alive in Sikeston now who can remember when our community didn't have a movie theater.
Right.
I mean, you really, really go back. And understandably, quite understandably, there's a lot of public opposition to the closure. Because, and the argument is a valid one, is, you know, in communities our size, and it's certainly not just restricted to Sikeston, but we often lack a lot of opportunities for young people.
Sure.
Leisure time activities, entertainment activities, what have you. And a movie theater is central to that. And so it's regardless of how we got here, it's absolutely terrible that we don't have an active movie theater here.
Right.
As I point out in an editorial, and I think you'll probably agree, it's kind of a situation where both sides are right to some extent. The city was right in addressing some health and safety issues at the Malco.
Based on a lot of complaints.
That's correct. And the Malco had acknowledged, as you said, in a public meeting, that there were some issues with the theater, with the complex. And so the city was right in addressing those. I mean, God forbid something should happen of a tragic nature there that the city could have avoided. So the city's position in taking kind of a hard-nosed approach on the Malco, I can understand. The Malco's position, I also understand, and that is they're saying that we understand we have some deficiencies, but are they in fact being singled out for those deficiencies when there are other buildings that are open for public use in Sikeston that are not held to the same standard?
And there may be some that will be held to the same standard.
I would suspect so. Yeah. And the city has access to all this information. Right. It's my understanding, and there are, we sit here today and talk about that, and quite frankly, as people are watching this, there may have even been additional changes in this ongoing saga.
Sure, it could change by the minute.
Because it really, really does. But it's my understanding that the Malco is beginning to address some of those code violations and some of those issues that were brought to their attention by the city. And that's a good first step, obviously.
Right, and they don't own the building.
No.
There's an owner, a developer,
correct,
that owns the building. But to me, it's, if they really want to be here, it's fixable.
No question about it. And first and foremost, the citizens of Sikeston deserve, and I think they truly deserve this. I think they deserve an entertainment outlet such as a movie theater. But at the same time, they deserve one that is clean and up to date and safe and accessible to everyone. And so. As we said here, I hope that there's a resolution to this.
Sure, I do too. And you could say a town of this size or this region could probably only support one
Yes.
movie theater.
Yes.
I've heard and read the Malco person say that they're probably the best bet, and there wouldn't be anybody else interested in our market. I don't
Right.
think that's true.
No, I don't think that's true
I
at
don't
all.
think that's true.
With our population, although we have a declining population, I think there are other movie theater chains. I think there are other developers who would be interested in coming to Sikeston. The Malco obviously is in the better position because they're here, but it will take some improvements on their part to get the facility back up and running, and I hope it happens soon. I hope it happens by the time this
I hope so
this
too.
web program airs.
Because the bottom line is you can bring it up to a standard that's acceptable and
Right.
it's safe, and that'll be okay. Or if you don't feel like it's worth the investment, then give the opportunity for someone else to come in.
Absolutely,
You know.
because at the end of the day, and when the discussion's over with, we as a community want, need, and deserve a movie theater.
Right.
That's been part of our culture since long before we were a part of this culture, and we need that. And I think all they're asking the Malco is, we want to partner with you. We're glad that you're here. Here's what we expect.
And the one thing that the community apparently didn't want, if you go back to, I think it was an August 1st public hearing at City Council, and then the story that was in the newspaper, I think the following day,
Yes.
go back and look at that story, it was clear that the community did not want to use the taxing district by way to make this improvement, because the general consensus was the developer and the operator, Malco, could have made these improvements all along.
That's correct,
If they'd have
yeah.
wanted to, so they didn't want to tax the other people in that area
Right.
for their improvements. And
Yeah.
I think that decision is made.
It is, and this story kind of begins and ends with that tax proposal. The Malco recognized that they needed to make some improvements. They acknowledged that in a public setting.
Yes.
And they wanted the CID, they wanted a tax district to help pay for those improvements. But those,
Can't blame them for that.
No, and I understand that, and that's the purpose of it, and it's used in a lot of communities.
But it didn't work.
But the merchants involved in it and the community said, we're not supportive of that.
Right.
And that's the process, and that's how it works in this community and in this country, and that's fine. That puts the Malco in the position then of acknowledging, on the one hand, they had deficiencies. There was no success in getting the tax district formed, and so now the burden kind of falls on the Malco to, as you said, either make those improvements or make way for someone else who will provide that outlet for us.
And time will tell. And speaking of a taxing district, there's an effort with the Historic Downtown Group to do the same thing in the downtown area.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
creation of a CID. Now, this is more, I don't know if it's more or less of a democratic process, but it's done by soliciting and polling the property owners
Right.
in the historic downtown district and asking them if they're willing to vote for a 1-cent sales tax
Right, right.
to support downtown's activities,
Right.
support, they have a director
Right,
that
right.
works on getting businesses there, works on community events. I mean, they've had some great events, and the wine tasting, the farmers markets turned out to be a really nice thing in the summer, a big one.
This past week they had a family day event at the depot, which was, I went by there, good turnout.
Right. The rodeo parade ended there this
Yes.
year. There's a
Yes.
lot of people there, so there's a lot of interest. So now proposals going before the property owners in the downtown area. Would you like to create a taxing district?
Right.
And what we're going to do is assess a 1-cent sales tax, and
Right.
we're going to use that money for the further development of downtown. And there are people who say, I don't want to
Right.
use that method.
Right.
And there are those who say they do want to use that method.
Right.
But there's a public hearing coming up at City Council chambers on Monday, October 24th at 11:30 a.m. So people have the opportunity to go before the council and express their opinion.
And you know, Sikeston is not unique in an effort to improve a historic downtown area.
No.
Charleston's a prime example. Major improvement in their downtown area. If you go way back, Jackson is another prime example. Neither one of those communities used this particular method, but everyone wants to hold on and promote their historic downtown. I understand that. It could be argued very easily that now is not necessarily time to impose an additional tax. The overall economy, as we all know, is in the tank, and to be promoting an additional tax right now, it's tough time for that, quite frankly. But the process will be decided by those who are impacted by it.
And that's what makes you feel good about it, because it's a simple majority.
Yes, yes.
It's the property owners. They have the say on whether this will pass or not, plus they have an opportunity to express their opinions. If the council moves forward with it, then a ballot actually goes out,
yes,
and they vote on it.
That absolutely.
And the majority wins. If
right,
it's majorities yes, majorities no, that's how it ends.
And if the majority are not in favor of it at this time, which is a strong possibility, quite honestly, that doesn't mean that the issue is dead completely. It just means that at this time, maybe now is not the best time.
They have to look at alternative ways of funding.
Right.
You know, there could be.
But regardless of how it happens, we do have a resurgence of interest in the historic downtown in Sikeston, and that bodes well for our community, no question about it.
And go Bulldogs! You know, they're in district play. Of course, they're going to beat Cape, and then they'll play Farmington.
And that's the prediction of Steve McPhee.
Yep.
And it'll go right. Listen, we're running out of time, as we always do. I thank you again for joining us, joining with me today, and we thank you for watching us. Tune us in next week. Come have a cup of coffee with us. Thank you for joining us.